so much. I appreciate that. If you guys can hear me in the back, let me know. Just a couple of things about this. You do have a lot of notes. That's more just to talk about. I'm sure I have enough to talk about. I have to skip over a few things. There's so many things to talk about, so many good things we could say, that I'm going to necessarily kind of run through them very quickly. So any questions you have, just don't wait till the end. Just raise your hand and ask them immediately if you wish. A couple things. One I was going to say, it's wonderful to see you all kneeling. That was just great to see. There's an old legend, old tradition, the devil has no knees. He can't kneel before God because his pride lacks the ability to kneel anymore. And so to see us kneeling before prayer for Christ, to begin our talk, to begin our coming to him, it's great to see, and so wonderful thing to see. I was here when this group started about 4 years ago. So this is bringing back a lot of nostalgia for me, a lot of memories. Also to see some of the esteemed clergy on my side here. Father Chris over here has known me since I was about 4 years old. And poor man.
The stories I could tell.
I'll pay you later, Father. Please don't. So we're going to talk about morality today, especially the area of sexual morality. And this area of sexuality is one our culture is the most confused about. It really is. In our entertainment, our cultural heroes, from the sports stars to celebrities, they push all kinds of junk at us. They want to tell us all kinds of things are good and listed when they're not. And this is important for us to understand, both because of the generation, because a lot of you are beginning to be at the time of your life, you're going to be formed some serious relationships. It's an important part of your life, an important part of who you are. Because this helps you to answer God's call to your vocation. A lot of people here, when we talk about sexual morality, the first thing that comes to mind is you're going to hear all the things that, quote unquote, the church says we can't do. That people think. They expect a big list of no's. And yes, there are things we can't do. But we can't begin there. Would it make sense if we began there? Would it make sense why the church says no? It's because there's a greater yes. Morality, which is really ultimately the choices of saying yes to God, the choice of the human freedom, always begins with what to do. It's about living a certain way, about imitating Christ, imitating God, revealing to the world the truth of who God is. That's where morality has to begin. You know, who played sports in high school? Who plays sports now? Who exercises? Who runs? Well, a few of you. Good. Good. You know, playing sports, if you're going to go towards playing sports, the rules are not the end of the game. Yeah, they're good to know. But you can know the rules perfectly and still be a horrible player. You can know all the rules perfectly. It doesn't end there. It can't even begin there. You first have to practice and learn how to play the game, and then learn what not to do. So we're going to start kind of with some general things about morality, and then talk about the point of sexuality in the human body, before going on to the list of no's that everyone's expecting. So morality is basically just a fancy word for human choice. For some reason, they gave me a pink marker. So I'm writing with a pink marker. We're talking about love. So morality is basically equals choice. Free will. It's how we act, how by our actions, by our choices, we form ourselves in the world around us. So right and wrong, good and evil. So why do you want to choose to act in a certain way, not other ways? Why must we behave and do certain things and refuse to do other things? It needs to go back to God. God's the creator. God made all things. Hopefully this isn't news to you. He's the source of all things. Before he created anything, before there was even a before and after we could even talk about, God existed. He was happy and blessed of himself. And so there was nothing else that God could pattern anything off of except for himself. Everything he's made, which is everything, reflects God, shows who he is. All of reality is patterned after God, sometimes only in simple, humble ways, but always after God. So morality and the truth of the Catholic faith, what we believe and how we act, can never be divorced in thought or practice. They're not two separate cousins. They're the two sides of the same coin. In the end, the reason why I behave a certain way, why I should do certain things, because God's God, the source of reality. All nature flows from him and reflects from him, and I, by my free choices, can bring them closer to him or farther away from him. So faith and morality, what we believe and how we act, is imitation of God in two different ways. They both imitate God, both unite us to God. So following the law isn't about simply some abstract duty. It's a relationship with a person. Coming to be united with a person, coming with God. Obedience to the moral law is acting in conformity to the mind of God. It's how one becomes more like God. It's how we as creatures, as human beings, can live the divine life in a human manner. We're doing what God does. It's how we reach the good God wishes to bestow upon us. So we'll begin by looking at the human person. And we need to begin by looking at why we're made a certain way. So let's think about this for a minute. Why did God make you? What are you for? If I were to ask you what this is for, why it was made, it's to write pink letters on a whiteboard. Everyone knows. What's this for? It's a watch to help you know time, to help you to be quiet and wrap up your talking time. What are you for? Why were you made? Someone give me an answer. Where's the Jeopardy theme song?
I was still wondering.
To love God. To love God.
To love God. Good. Good. Anyone want to add to that? Great answer. I like it. Want to add? Anyone to add?
To know, love, and serve God and be happy with him.
Perfect. Great answer. Old Baltimore Catechism, yeah? So, great answer. To know, love, and serve God in this world, be happy with him forever in the next. Basically covers everything. Thank you. You know what I first thought when I heard that the first time? That's selfish. I mean, imagine if I were to stand up here and tell you, you're all here to know me and to love me and to serve me. And that's how you're going to be happy. I mean, no, it wasn't selfish of God, but you didn't understand why it wasn't selfish of God. And it's not enough to say, well, God made us, so he gets to choose. That's true, but there's a little more to it than that. There's an old riddle, which gives us the answer. And the riddle goes like this. What is greater than God, more evil than the devil, and if you eat it, you die?
Nothing.
Nothing. So I'll say this riddle for great. Great. So nothing's greater than God, that's more evil than the devil. If you eat nothing, you die. Great. Good answer. This also tells us why God made us for himself. Because God, when he made you, looked at you and said, I want to give you the greatest of all possible things. I want to make you for the greatest of all possible reasons. And that's himself. God could have made you just to run around outside, enjoy the sunshine, get some sleep, just have a nice run final time, eat a bit, but that wasn't good enough for you. God could have made you for other people. Could have made you for me. I'm pretty great. But not good enough for you. Only God is good enough for you. Only God. Because there's nothing greater, nothing better he could give you. He wanted to make you for the best thing possible as himself. And so we're saying we're meant to know him. It's meant to know the greatest of all mysteries, God. We're meant to have a relationship with the greatest of all things, God himself. And he asks us to work with him in this world to bring you united to himself and help him make it better, more beautiful. And that's how not only become happy, it's how we come to serve him, to be with him. God made you to be happy forever. And so a desire for happiness isn't wrong. It's the good thing, actually. But your happiness is only going to be found in God. And if we seek it anywhere else, we're never going to be satisfied. Because nothing is good as God is. Nothing even comes close. And since you were made for God, because that's the reason you exist, if you try to put our ultimate happiness in anything else, we're never going to make it. We're going to be miserable. So, first of all, we're made for God. The second thing, and very important to realize, and hopefully obvious to everyone here, is we're body and soul. We're body and soul persons. Sometimes we separate these two things in our mind too much. To be a man means having both a soul and a body. You don't have either one of those, you're not a human being. Being a book, being my notes, means being both paper and words with a meaning. Without the paper, I have no notes. Without the words, I have no notes. I need both. Being a human being means being both body and soul. What it means is that we're physical creatures who are a person, meant to spend eternity with God and be with him forever in heaven. We're meant to use the things of this world to give God glory, to make them better than they could be on their own. There's a priest named Father Reyes who wrote about 60 years ago an essay on the human church, on the human being. And he says, think of the ocean. We can know that same thing, a big body of water, in a variety of different ways, different parts of our senses. We hear the waves, you can smell the salt, maybe taste it, we can feel the water, we can see it. But there's something we know about it which our senses do not tell us. We know its meaning and its value, that it's good, that it's beautiful. There's no sense for that. This is recognized by the intellect, by the part of our soul. Once we know something, we can recognize that it's good and we can want it. We can want it for the body. It's good to relax. It's good to be in the sun. Want it for the soul. It's good to meditate. Good to spend time thinking about deep meanings of life. But the deepest desire of the human heart is twofold. The deepest desire of the human heart, because we're persons, is to love and to be loved. We want to know that we're valued and cherished, and to be able to value and cherish others in return. To be persons means to meant to have relationships with other people, first of all with God, but then with other children that God has made. God made one human nature, but this human nature comes in two flavors, two genders. There's two ways of being a human being, male and female. Men and women are equal in God's eyes. We're meant for the same purpose. Both have the same desires. We both have the same needs. In terms of rights and dignity and value, there's a difference between men and women. But there is great difference in other ways. And that's important to recognize and to realize. The differences that God made are good. It's real and profound. Scientists have proven that if there were to be a hammer on the table in front of us right here, Do you know that men and women use different parts of their brain to know the same hammer? You both know what it is, but how to use it. I know some ladies know how to use it a lot better than I do. But you know it through a different pathway, a different way of knowing. And this is true about a lot of the way we're made. We're meant for God, the same purpose, the same end, the same destiny. We're meant to come there as we're made by God, either as male or female. Different roles in God's plan. Every human being, because we have this desire, we have a vocation, the calling from God to love and to be loved. To love and to act in ways that let us love. To serve and to love. We're asked to serve and to love in different ways. The human body is, you might say, a natural sacrament. A sacrament is a physical thing established by Christ, which reveals an invisible gift of his grace.
Can you say that again?
Yes. So there's a couple definitions, but a sacrament is a physical thing given to us by Jesus Christ for the purpose of revealing and showing an invisible grace and making it real, giving it to us. The technical definition is an outward sign given to us by Christ to give grace. But the body is like a sacrament. It's this physical thing given to us by God which reveals us about something. Reveals in a physical, material way what God's doing in an invisible, immaterial way, a spiritual way. What the body reveals is the body reveals the person. A creature made by God to know and to love. A creature made by God to know and to love and be happy with him forever in heaven. To work with him freely in his plan. But the human person is a soul that's flesh. We have to live out our spiritual life in a bodily, physical way. We can never divorce our spiritual life from our physical life. God doesn't want us to do that. God himself took on a human nature, took on a human flesh. To show us how to be transformed in our human life. So the human body communicates something to us. And what it communicates to us is the love and the grace of God to a material creation. In the beginning in Genesis, Adam tells God to till the garden, to work in the garden for him. To make the world better and more beautiful, to touch and to guide the physical universe. The most important way this happens is when one human being to another speaks and teaches and helps people to see who God is. Because we're physical creatures, we can only begin to know through our senses. But it doesn't end there. So the body has a meaning and a value given to it by God. And what this means is that the meaning and value aren't given to it by human beings, aren't established by human beings, but must be recognized by human beings, or we're going to be miserable. We're going to mess ourselves up. Because we're persons, we're meant to know and to love others. We're meant to be a gift of love to other people. We're made by God to work with him, to help each other, to work with him in his strength, for his glory, and for our happiness. We're a gift from God, but not from God alone, because God gave us freedom. God said this gift will also be from you. So we deliberately choose to be gifts, deliberately choose to be persons who live and act in such a way others are brought to God, are brought to ultimate happiness and their goodness. brought together in God. The very fact that we're made male and female shows this fact. The body shows we're a gift. This is the teaching of St. John Paul II. Now, obviously, this does refer to the fact that in marriage, we're to take part in the creation of more people. But it's not the only fact. Every human person is meant to be a gift to others. And the body points to the fact we're meant for other people, in our masculinity and our femininity, that we can't hold within ourselves all that we need. It shows we're meant to love and to serve, to help others in every way we can. But to be a human being means to love and to be loved. We're meant to form relationships. And the body itself teaches us this. Look, we have hands to work, a tongue to speak and communicate with. I mean, others to survive. We only begin to exist because of other people, because of our love of our parents for each other. As the body shows that men are meant to come together and with God to create new human life and to raise that human life up, to know God, to make human persons meant to live for all eternity in heaven forever. Men and women are made for each other. Each gender is meant to make up what the other one lacks. Where God bestows one gift on one person, he makes up for it in another way. And so men and women complement each other. That's complement with an E. It means go together, like peanut butter and jelly. Not complement with an I, which means you look great today. Complement. Go together. We have to be careful not to either exaggerate nor diminish the importance of the body. We do need the body to be a human being. Without the body, there is no human being. Having a body makes us male or female. Shows we are not meant just for ourselves, but other people. Remember, the soul, those that make us persons. The soul is where God comes to us in his grace. The soul that makes us human. The soul lets us know and love. The soul lets us be adopted as God's children. But we're adopted not just as souls, but as persons. It means everything we have, everything we are. Body, soul, persons. And we need both of ourselves to live as God wishes us to live. Because we're body and soul persons, we're meant to live here in this world in a physical way. To work in a material way. And what this means, because of that fact, we give ourselves more and better, not less. We give ourselves both body and soul. We speak and use everything we have. So in our friendships, our relationships, don't just sit around thinking good thoughts. We communicate. We spend time with other people. We do things. We speak with our voices. We heal with our hands. We have to actually live as gifts for the other. And this, of course, is only possible with grace. When God created the human race, created Adam and Eve, let me pause for a minute. Are there any questions? We're going to go at a real galloping pace. Questions before we continue? Very good. Okay. When God created Adam and Eve, God instituted marriage. Marriage is a gift to us from God and was first given to us in Eden. And my pen is running out of ink.
Of course.
We are running out of love.
Need more grace, Father. You need to pray for us. And I'm writing it wrong-handed because Father's making me laugh. Shame on you.
Let me try this so far. Oh, green.
Ooh, green.
Pentecost.
There we go.
That was probably the most amazing thing I've seen all day.
You live a sad life, really. As we hear in the book of Genesis, chapter 2:24, that is why a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife. Two of them become one flesh. Marriage is the complete gift of body and soul, one given person to the other, mutual gift. Since it's body and soul, it can only be given to a man and woman. The mutual gift, mutual complete gift of self to self. Or other self, I'll say. Body and soul. So a man becomes his wife, the woman becomes her husband, completely, body and soul. There are two kinds of marriage. There's the marriage established in the garden, which every human being can enter. And then there's a sacramental marriage only be entered into by the baptized. We're going to discuss both of them. There's the natural that everyone can have, and the sacramental, which you have to be baptized in order to receive. So marriage is the union of man and woman, living together as husband and wife. And the union is what makes the marriage. Even our secular society honors and respects marriage. They don't quite get what it is. We make romantic all the wrong things. But we respect that marriage. There's a longing for it. Because it answers the deep desire of the human heart. Or begins to. Every woman is meant to be a mother. Every man's meant to be a father. Pius XI does this. But of course, there's two ways to be father and two ways to be mother. There's the bodily, natural way, and then there's the spiritual way. Most people are called to both. To first come together and then raise a child, create a child in love, and then raise the child to know God. Some are just called to be fathers in a spiritual sense, mothers in a spiritual sense. But if the glory on the heart of every woman is to be mother, she only becomes a mother through her husband, through a gift of union of her husband. Her husband makes her a mother. And if the glory and strength of man is fatherhood, he only becomes father through his wife. And the wife is given to her husband this gift and that duty. So marriage is mutual. It's one to another. It can't be taken or forced. It can't be only on one side. Otherwise, there's no union. There are four essential qualities, four essential elements. Sometimes they're squished down to three. We'll talk about four. All depends on who you read. But the union must have four qualities. Think of these as four ingredients. If you're baking a chocolate cake, you have to have chocolate and flour and eggs and sugar. If you get rid of all these different things, you don't have the cake. So these are four qualities, four essential qualities, necessary qualities, or you don't have it. It must be free. Love that's not free isn't love. If I were to come in here, the shotgun on my shoulder, and cock the shotgun and say, "Who here is my friend today?" Y'all would probably say, "Oh, I am. I'm your best buddy." But it wouldn't really be true. I can make you say it. But friendship, love that's not free, isn't love. Something that's stolen or coerced, not a gift, must be a free gift. It must be faithful. permanent, forever. Marriage is a gift. Once you give somebody a gift, you can't decide you want to take it back later on because you're upset. If I were to give Paul a birthday present, I couldn't later on say, you know what, Paul, you made me angry, I'm going to go to your house and hey, take that present back. Once I give it, I can't take it back, it's his. Once you give yourself away, you can't take yourself back or give yourself to somebody else. You're not your own anymore. And this is why marriage will only be between one man and one woman. It's permanent. You can't say, I'm only going to give you myself for a period of time, or I'm just not happy anymore. But it's forever. Has to be entire. Giving all of yourself, everything you have. You hold nothing back. The union is meant to be a union of body and soul, everything you have. If you hold something back, you take part at the back. If you keep something back, the union that's meant to be there is destroyed. And so for that union to exist, it must be entire. And it must be fruitful, it must be open to life. You see, marriage, of its very nature, leads to new life. The united union leads to new life. And if the marriage is afraid of keeping itself back in this way, then it's not a full gift. It's saying open to everything about you except for your sexuality, except for your fruitfulness, except for your gender. In other words, an open to you, is what it's really saying. A marriage that's afraid of new life, that's supposed to be stingy with what life comes into life, is being stingy with love. It destroys the union, destroys fertility, and it says the union not being united together as man and one woman, as husband and wife. In most cases, even a natural union cannot be dissolved. A couple limited exceptions, but they're very rare and too complicated for this point. We need to discuss then the great gift that God's given the human race called sexuality. The marital embrace, sexual union. There are two major errors in our culture that have to be avoided. And the first says that sexuality is simply for fun, entertainment. The second says that it's dirty and evil. And both are wrong. Both are very wrong. Human sexuality has a meaning and a purpose given to it by God. It's a way of giving oneself to another completely, body and soul. And so it seals and symbolizes and represents a complete gift, not a partial one. It says the husband belongs to his wife, and the wife belongs to her husband, body and soul. To be faithful in married love means that one truly means what they've said in their bodily union. They've given themselves completely and as honestly as they said they had in their married vows. Being unfaithful in marriage, then, is to lie with the whole person. To lie with your body as well as to lie with your lips. So this was designed by God. Was planned by God, made by God. It's therefore good and beautiful. It's meant to be an expression of love. That's the only expression or the foundation of love. But it's a good and holy and sacred. Because it says, one, it allows it to be complete. It represents and shows a complete gift. shows a complete union with everything that the person has. And it's also the means through which God creates new souls, new life. New person is destined to be with him forever. In the marital embrace, we have a gift the angels cannot claim. No angel, no matter how great, has ever cooperated with God in the creation of a person. No angel has ever cooperated with God in making there exist a new creature that will live for eternity and is meant to be with God forever. Only human beings have that gift and that duty and that privilege. It's only in the body of a woman, under her heart, the human person is meant to grow, to develop, and then to live and become holy. So love and life cannot be separated. Cannot, not in the sense of impossibility, but cannot in the sense of without serious damage and harm. So what this means is that this love isn't simply a gift to each other. It's an act of service for God, because it's the means through which God makes new people. It's the means through which God helps us to grow, to become good. So God takes human love, natural love, and blesses it. He touches it and uses that love to create new love. As Fulton J. Sheen says, the love of man is meant to be so real and true that in 9 months you give it a name. This is meant to lead to two blessings. They're often called two goods or ends or purposes of marriage. The reason why God meant to be joined together in one flesh. And sometimes you'll have a third one added, but we'll talk about two. Goods of marriage. The good of spouses and the good of children. Two gifts from God. Two blessings. If I'm baking something, hopefully I have the idea that it will nourish and be enjoyable to be eaten. If my idea of baking something is to poison or to make sicken, it's not leading to what the good are supposed to have. A marriage that seeks only one of these goods is a twisted marriage, a broken marriage. Because it's saying, I want less good than God wishes to give me. Let's look at the children first. We're made to love and to be loved. Let's do a simple mind experiment. Imagine for an instant, you have all the money in the world. You're famous. Everyone knows your name. You can buy the fanciest cars you want. People applaud you whenever you appear. You can buy anything you want. Wear the nicest clothes, get the fanciest food. You're a success in every way. Picture that? Now imagine this. Imagine you know for certain, in spite of that, you have no friends and no one loves you. Are you happy? No, of course not. We're not made for things. We're made for people. And we're taught, unfortunately, that quality of life has to do with more things and not more people that love us and more people to be loved in our lives. And so for children in a marriage, do not make the quality of life less, they make it better. Children in marriage are more people to love. God's decided will only create new people in the love and union of man and a woman. He could have created them in a number of ways. He's God. But this new life, this new union, blesses the husband and wife in a very special way. Each child is another bond of their love, a living expression and proof of their love for each other. One of the reasons to be joined together, to remain together. You know what's funny and sad? Someone has a third child. First thought and response is, hey, you guys know where that comes from, right? You know what causes that, right? Can you imagine someone coming in, driving up to the garage with a third car? Hey, you know what causes that, right? You know where that comes from, right? No one would say that. People would say, aren't you lucky you have a third car? Cars are expensive. Cars leak. Cars need to be taken care of. Cars need a lot of time and space and energy to make sure they run correctly. The fanciest car will never make us happy as a human being. Marriage is also for the good of the spouse, the good of the people involved. To build up, make the husband and wife better people. Gives them someone to lean on. Help each other in different ways. You see, marriage is meant to be a school of love. God's training us to be better people, more loving people. So in marriage, God's training us, teaching us to love someone else as we should love them. To die to self and others first. To stop thinking as much about ourselves as we do, more about the other person. And so God begins with someone it's easy to love first, at least. Someone we're attracted to, someone who we say, oh, they're good to be with. But love in a marriage has to go beyond simply emotion and attraction. It has to become a choice to love and to serve even when difficult. Even without emotion. Picture for yourself, are interested in a honeymoon. Man and wife are leaving on their honeymoon on a cruise, romantic cruise. They both get seasick. No one's going to say they're not in love. Again, they're not thinking about each other. They just want to go and crawl bed and die. But they're still in love. It's not the emotion, it's the choice. So you begin with learning how to love another human being besides themselves. And then God adds children. Helpless beings who need them entirely to survive. Need to be raised and taught how to become good people. And this for many, many, many years. And so gradually, they should begin to learn to become less selfish. Gradually, they learn how to work with him and for him. And so love of husband and wife should be like the ripples of a pond, beginning at a small center, but growing out to embrace more and more people, all of society, and all of the human race. Marriage also builds up society. It's how you get people in the first place. So people are trained and raised to know what to do and what not to do. And a society should have a great interest in marriage, because without a society, without a family, there's no society at all. Everything we've talked about is a natural marriage. Every marriage, even to atheists, should have a marriage like this. See, God takes this natural marriage, He makes it a sacrament. Well, God gives us the sacrament because He takes the natural we can know and see and touch and understand, and He elevates it. So in baptism, He takes an ordinary washing and infuses it with His grace and His blessing. And it washes not the body, but the soul, free of original sin, and it makes it the child the adopted son, daughter, or daughter of God. So God takes this marriage, this stuff, and confuses it with His grace. And as good as natural marriage is, as beautiful as natural marriage is, a sacramental marriage is 1,000,000 times better. It has everything the natural marriage has elevated, brought now to work with God. We'll go through that very quickly here.
So what is the difference between natural and sacramental?
Well, the same difference between natural life and supernatural life. A sacrament is always for the purpose of giving grace and union with God.
But Adam and Eve were created innocent in His
They were, yes.
And the marriage was actually united by God. So.
Yeah.
But then
So,
they
but they're also created as sons and daughters of God. We now have a baptism which supplies for that. And so, because of original sin, there were certain things that are broken.
So what did Christ
Yeah.
do for us? Did He elevate us or did He redeem us?
Both. Both. So there is a elevation because now we're united to God through Him. Not just through Adam, but through Christ who is God. But there's also redemption because what's been broken is now being healed. What's been severed is now being restored.
Yeah. But I thought that the marriage in the paradise and the marriage now is essentially the same because it was created by God.
They're not. I would say no. The marriage we have now is better.
Right, but there are not two kinds of marriage.
Mhm.
You know, like I'm living natural marriage, and next year I would like to live supernatural marriage, and then I go back to the natural marriage.
Well, there is because a natural marriage isn't a sacrament. In the same way, the sacrament always gives us the divine life.
Right, but this is still the same marriage. You know what I mean? The material is still the same.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so God takes this, He elevates it, He changes it. The water in baptism and the water you drink are two different elements.
So there are not two kinds of marriage. I'm confused maybe with English.
Okay.
But there are not two kinds of marriage. There is only one marriage.
I think the confusion is the way I'm using the word kind. I think we both mean the same thing, but we're emphasizing different points.
Okay.
So what I would say is there are two kinds in the sense that one gives us grace. I'll talk about this in detail. One gives us grace and unites us to God. The other kind does not. However, both are made from God, by God. Both are really good gifts to us from God. Both are meant for our holiness or happiness. But only one gives us divine life.
Okay, so with a natural marriage you can't enter heaven? Well,
The natural marriage will not make you holy, no. In and of itself, no.
And if I never knew God and I got married, is my marriage indissoluble or dissoluble?
It's indissoluble.
So it's still indissoluble because it was created by God, right?
Yes, but there is a distinction because one is infused with His grace and one's not. And the same with our natural life. You know, we have natural life, we have supernatural life. Both are made by God, both are made to be united to God. We can never divorce the one from the other.
You just said that natural marriage is not dissoluble, but aren't there specific conditions under which the church can dissolve natural marriage? Like outlined in Scripture.
Yeah, okay, so,
When,
thank
for
you.
example, there's a pagan couple and one
Yeah.
partner in the pagan couple converts, and then the other spouse departs because of conversion. Don't they call that the Pauline privilege?
Yeah, there are some very,
The
very
church
exceptions.
dissolves the natural
Usually,
marriage.
though, there's no way that it is dissolved, usually. But you're right, there are a couple of very rare exceptions. So yes, you're right, Father, that both are from God and both are good. Both help us. But I'm saying that I'm making a distinction in the same way that I can make a distinction between natural life and supernatural life. You can't have one without the other. If you're not alive, you can't be baptized. You can't be united to Christ. You need that first. So the natural marriage, God takes everything there and He blesses it.
It's elevated to the level of the sacrament to help us to survive this marriage, because otherwise we are so.
It has a new purpose, though, in a new meaning. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. But it has a new purpose, and a new meaning, and a new greatness. So we'll talk about this now. Great question, Paul.
But yeah, I'm still starting.
Can you wait till I finish? Then we'll talk about that afterwards. If you still put the same question afterwards, then we'll talk. But I think if you let me finish this, then you'll see what I'm talking about. So in a natural marriage, a man and woman give themselves to each other completely and freely. Through the wedding vows, through the promises for their families. In a sacramental marriage, though, they're now bound not just in society, but before God. So the gift is from their will, but the union is from God. God gives them a union in the sacrament, a strength and a sweetness in the union that natural marriage does not have. So a sacramental marriage has all the dignity and the goodness of a natural marriage, but with an additional glory and honor. It's not simply a human action. It's an act of praise and of worship of God. It's a religious action. It's a gift of a man to a woman, and a woman to a man, but done to praise and glorify God. It's an act of worship. It's a liturgical act. An act of liturgy. And so it begins to fulfill the vocation of the human being in a very special way. It unites man to God and man to each other and blesses the physical world, because in the physical world, God's been honored and glorified. And so the promises in a sacramental marriage have an additional beauty and solemnity without losing anything of a natural marriage. Because the promises aren't made to just simply to each other, or even to a culture or society. They're made to God. They promise to love each other because God wanted it. Their promises before God, for the sake of God. Given to God himself, their promises to God as an action of religious honor. And so they have union now, not just in their own wills, but especially union in Christ. So their marriage is united in Christ in a sacramental marriage. See, before they're married, they were baptized, they were joined to God in baptism. They became members of his body, received life from him, became able to do actions that were supernaturally pleasing to him. Because of the graces given to them by God, they were able to make their daily life supernaturally pleasing. Able to offer every part of their lives as a sacrifice, not the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Baptism, though, unites not just us to God, but us to each other, part of the mystical body. And so this union in marriage is made better and more beautiful. Mystical bodies especially united. They can only become that way because they were first united to Jesus in baptism. So marriage, therefore, is a mutual service to Christ. It gives them a new office, a new task in the mystical body. They receive a new office in the church. So before the marriage, the man comes to God and says, where do you want me to serve you? How do you want me to love you? And God points to a specific woman and says, here, take this woman as your wife. Help her to get to heaven. I want you to serve me by loving her and bringing her to heaven. To care and honor her. And then together, raise up a family of the children that I give you. Woman's meant to stand for God and say, where do you want me to serve you? I want to love you. How do you want me to follow you? God points to a man and says, here, I want you to serve and to love and help this man get to heaven. And together raise up a family for me that we will be in heaven as well. The union still has the qualities. It's free. It's faithful. It's fruitful. It's entire. But it's not free, faithful, fruitful, entire because of their union, their promises to each other. It's this way because they love God and have been avowed to him. The sacrament flows from the cross. Every sacrament receives grace because of the death of Christ. All grace we have now comes to us from Christ. So marriage isn't simply a gift for mutual help and support, but marriage is a means of grace. Marriage now is a means of grace, a means of holiness. Doing natural human actions without baptism can't make us holy, can bring us to God. We can't ever earn enough good things by ourselves without grace to become holy and sanctified. But marriage, because it's a means of grace and a cause of grace. Marriage is meant to make us holy and bring us ever closer to God. Now, of course, you have to use the graces offered, that you cannot refuse them. But every sacrament hands on the gifts that Christ won by his death. Marriage is the same thing. It hands on something we can see and touch and feel and hear. And so marriage isn't simply forged by weak human wills and hearts, but it's been forged by the death of God. The sacramental marriage has been forged by God's death, by God's dying on the cross. That's where the marriage has beginning. In the heart and love of Christ for the human race. Every sacrament makes real what it signifies. It's efficacious. If you understand what the symbol is, what it means, then you know what it does. Every sacrament makes real what it signifies. So baptism symbolizes a washing and a cleansing, and it really happens as washing and cleansing in the soul. The sacrament signifies a union with Christ and with each other. It makes that real. It signifies a union with Christ and with each other in Christ. The matter, the stuff that God uses for the sacrament, same way that God uses the water in baptism, the stuff he used in the sacrament is the action of the married couple, mutual exchange of their vows. As they play this before a priest. Once the vows have been consummated, lived out in the bodily expressions, sexual act, marriage can never be dissolved. No earthly power can ever break it. Even the Pope himself can't make them no longer be married. So sex is a part of the bodily part of their vow. The marital union, the marital embrace, makes their vows lived out and completely permanent. It's not the only way of living out the vow, even the most important way. It's the most complete way. The most complete expression of it because it involves both the body and the soul. Let's go back and look at the marital embrace before the fall. Before original sin. In the garden, Adam and Eve were made in grace. They both received grace for their very creation. They didn't need to get grace through the sacraments, but they grew in grace and union with God by deliberate acts of love for God, where their prayers are worked for His sake, in the same way that we can after we have the grace in the first place. And even though in reality Eve remained a virgin until after the fall, the marital union of husband and wife is meant to be a religious act even in the garden. Because it's meant to be the action of holy people done for love of God and through each other. If Adam hadn't sinned, the sexual act in and of itself would have caused an increase of grace, an increase in holiness, because it was an act of love for each other, created for God. It was an act of love for each other because they loved God. Originally, every person created through this union would have received grace by the mere fact that they're the children of Adam and Eve. So the physical embrace would have been simply the source of physical life, but the source of supernatural spiritual life, friendship and union with God. So the fall cut out the supernatural heart, cut out this part. And so the sacrament meant to heal and to restore this, making the union be holy and able to be sanctified once again. And so once again, because of the sacrament, the embrace does cause an increase of holiness, assuming it's done in a good way and a holy manner. Like any other marriage, human sexuality is two goods or ends. The children, the good of the spouses. In marriage, the sacramental marriage, they've consecrated their bodies to God. And they're raising up new children for the church, not just for society, human society. But human life permanently consecrated to God, new members of the body of Christ. And so living together as husband and wife, they offer each other mutual help and support, and they become holy and happy through each other. Looking at the time, I'm going to skip a few things. Marriage is meant for the holiness of their spouse, not just their happiness. Yeah, it's going to make us happy in the end. But it's not just about my happiness, it's just about me. It's about becoming holy. It's about allowing other people to be got to heaven. And so holiness, the sacrament in a very special way, so daily life is meant to be a means of union with God. Marriage of its very self is meant to be is a gift of oneself. But united to God, given over to God, joined in the sacrament, healed by a sacrament, elevated and healed, becomes a holy thing, a beautiful thing in a new way, and pleasing to God. It's a marriage that becomes a way to live in a bodily way, through daily ordinary human life, bodily life, which has been charged and inflamed by grace. It's the transformation of human life. Only now can we understand the list of no's the church gives. Because they're going to destroy this. They're going to destroy marriage. They're going to destroy the union God wants a marriage to have, a union to have. Did I answer your question, Father?
Oh, I think you said just the same what I meant.
Okay.
So it's
I think we should be using the term in different ways.
Yeah. So it's the same marriage. Before the fall and after Christ redeemed us. It's the same marriage.
Yes and no, because even before the fall, it wasn't through Christ.
Right, yeah.
But yeah.
But it's essentially.
Adam and Eve had the grace, and yes,
It's
yes,
essentially.
yes.
Well, I think what Father is saying is that natural marriage and sacramental marriage are fundamentally the same thing.
Right,
But
yeah.
sacramental marriage is natural marriage that has been elevated.
It gives.
We're using the terms in different ways, yeah.
It gives us ability to live, the way God designed it, because
Yeah.
we are weakened by sin.
But because of the original sin, you don't want to say the same thing.
Right, and
There's
we
no
are
difference.
baptized, and then we are
Yeah.
given this grace to
Yeah.
live it out according to the God's plan. Otherwise, it's hard and even
Yeah.
impossible to live. But still, we can become saints
Yes.
through the natural marriage. If we listen to the,
We can never become saints though without God's grace. And that's my point.
Right.
So that's the distinction I'm making.
But nothing is impossible.
Nothing is impossible with God, but it's still through His grace, never through us.
No, right.
Yeah. Same thing, just different emphases, I think.
Yeah.
Sin is always a destruction. Evil is always a lack of some good a thing is meant to have. So, before you can have a car crash, you have to have a car. Before you can have a worn out sweater or a sweater with holes in it, you have to have a sweater first. Sin never adds or increases a goodness, never perfects a plan. It's always a destruction. Sin is always a removal. It's always a destruction, always destroys. It always gets rid of something that it wants us to have. It always removes some good. So when God says, this is bad for you, when God says, don't do this, He's not trying to be mean or saying, ha guys, you can't do this. What He's saying is you're going to be miserable and I'm going to keep you from being miserable. You're going to kill yourselves and I'm going to make you live. So every sin we're warned about is because they attack the gift of marriage. They destroy the exclusivity, they destroy the fruitfulness, they destroy the freedom in marriage. They want to get rid of the ends of marriage. They want to make marriage be something we invent and make up. What ends up happening in every one of those cases is that the spouse becomes someone to be used, becomes simply be an object for my own happiness. And then you ignore who they are, their real dignity and their real glory. So the 6th and 9th commandments. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt covet thy neighbor's wife. Are gifts to us from God, because they help protect and show us how we're meant to live, and they end up leading us toward happiness. The commandment tell us to seek purity, seek chastity. It's a verse that lets us control the gift of sexuality. As St. Paul II says, it allows us to possess ourselves, the purpose of being able to have the freedom to give ourselves in the proper way. We can't give what we don't have. And so until we have self-control, until we're able to guide and direct ourselves, then we don't have the freedom to give ourselves. To give ourselves in this way. Basically what this says is that we're given the grace to look at people in the proper way, to recognize that they're persons, treat them as they should be served. We should be pure about the way we speak about the sexual embrace. Pure about the way we speak of the human body. Try to keep our imagination, our desires, our emotions in control, so we can treat others as they deserve. We should be chaste in their actions, treating others with care and love, not using them simply because we want something. So the verse basically recognizes the value and the dignity that God's given to the human body, the human person. And it helps us to follow out the commands of God out of love for God, trusting with the way He asks us to live is for our good and for our happiness. It's every respect the best way possible and the only way possible to be happy. This is not the same thing as celibacy. Even married people are called to be chaste. Outside of marriage, this means a training for a permanent gift, either to God in marriage that we've done with a human being, or through the exclusive gift of God in body and soul in the priesthood of religious life. It's allowing our interior life to correspond to our outward action. The proper use of the interior heart and affection. So it means that being pure means we don't think of people simply in terms of their bodies. We recognize that first they're persons. It means we don't try to take or receive the bodily union before it's been joined together in marriage. It means recognize the purpose and the beauty and the meaning of human sexuality. The essential qualities, the goods and the ends for which it's made. But there's also chastity in marriage, which is just as important. And it means, again, husband and wife treat each other as persons. Everyone caring and loving the other. The husband or the wife is not simply for bodily pleasure, not a thing to be used. The wife is the one to whom the husband gives himself. The husband is the one to whom the wife gave herself. To be united with each other in God, for the good of each other and for the good of children. Chastity means the vows they promise the made are held in honor and respect. The permanence is recognized and valued. There's a second virtue called modesty. And this controls the actions that lead to the use. So the purity is control of the sexuality itself. Modesty is the control of the acts that lead to sexuality. And first is of the mind, which is humility. And this is keeping your mind from being overly curious or curious in the wrong way. Yeah, it's good to know biology, it's good to know the way the body works, but there are certain details and certain things about sexuality that are meant to be secret between husband and wife. You don't seek the wrong kind of knowledge. We have modesty of the senses. It means, especially our eyes. Training ourselves to look away from things that lead us to sin. Place a shield over our hearts and over our minds, to look at other people in a certain way. It means we're careful about the movies we watch or the books we read. To keep our minds from focusing on others' bodies, to ignore the fact that they're persons. We also need modesty in the way we're dressed. That's the way most people think of it. The way we're clothed, or not clothed. To don't lead others into sin. We're careful about our conduct. If I had more time, I'd make a comment there, but I will leave it at that. So you have to realize sex and love are not the same thing. Sex is an expression of love. It's not the same as love. I can tell someone I love them, but if I turn them around and tell everyone they're fat and stupid and worthless and treat them that way, my words make me a liar. The union of bodies is meant to show love, meant to express love, but it can't take place without there being a real love. There can be a lie. Therefore, it can destroy the very things meant to communicate. So now let's talk about then, go through quickly some of these sins. So sex outside of marriage. The bodily union is meant to be a completion of the gift of self. Outside of marriage, it's not a gift. Outside of marriage, it tries to pretend that the union is in the lived expression of a gift, but it's the reason for marriage. See, it makes marriage be simply about the body. It shrivels the good of marriage. And that's why it's a serious sin. Try to give oneself in this way destroys the exclusivity the marriage is meant to have, because you can't have the entirety of the gift. Outside of marriage, it's open to the possibility of other partners. It seeks bodily pleasure as the primary reason. And people say, well, what if I really love this person? What if I really, really intend to get married soon and really love them? When you're married, you give your gift to yourself, to each other, through God, and for the church. If I saw a present under the Christmas tree, wrapped up with a name on it, I couldn't take it anytime I wanted to. I have to wait till Christmas. I have to wait till it's actually given to me. Even if there is a promise of marriage, until that gift has actually taken place, that gift is not yours. Someone can't take what's not theirs. And so the trying to have the embrace before marriage is to attempt to take something that's not given. It's the attempt to, it actually just destroys the gift. It says, I have a right to this, I demand this. It's not something freely given, not something that has anything to do with God. It only has to do with myself. And this is why this is a problem. This is why it's a very serious sin. Some people think that there are no sexual sins once you get married. It's not true. Marriage is about sex. The married life is a life lived together. It was first a union of the heart and the will, before the body, the union of the bodies can mean what it's meant to mean. So happiness and success of marriage doesn't equal sexual satisfaction. Happiness in marriage is from respect and love for each other. Shared selfishness is not a basis for happiness. Marriage is not about being given a new toy. It's about love for each other. And so even if I'm married, if I'm using my wife or my husband simply as a toy, simply about me, about my desires, my gratification, I'm not respecting who they are, I'm not accepting them as a gift. It gives me a total gift. Because of that, there is a serious sin of birth control, contraception. Why is the marital act more significant than another expression of affection? Because in the marital act, there is an exchange of something that's unique, a true gift of oneself, by which we say, the wife says to her husband, I'm unique to you, you're unique to me. The husband says to his wife, you are unique. They literally give part of themselves to the other. As a priest named Monsignor Cormac Burke says, saying to your husband or wife, I give you my heart is poetry. Saying, I give you my seed, my flesh, that's reality and that's true love. The marital embrace is the sharing of a power, a unique power only meant to be shared with another person, the power to be united before God, the power of the possibility of human life. And to be exclusive between each other. Contraception, in any of its forms, destroys this exclusivity, this completeness. It says, I refuse to give myself to you entirely. Even look at the words that we use. Protection. At the moment of intimacy and union with husband and wife, would it be protected from them? If you're afraid of them, afraid of what they're going to give you, how can you be united to them perfectly? It's trying to separate and destroy the goods of marriage. It says, I don't want to create new life. I don't want to be united together. And so it ends up destroying not just life, it ends up destroying the union as well. It says, I'm not going to be united to you entirely, completely, and perfectly. I'm going to quote Cormac Burke. He says this. Contraceptive sex is not procreative. That's good to everyone. What's not clear is that it's not unitive in any marital sense. It's not sex in any real human sense at all. What's being separated is the action of sex, the apparent action of sex, from the meaning of sex. It's the meaning of a maimed masculinity and a maimed femininity. It's not a gift of life, it's only the corpse of that gift. It's a dead gift. Marriage birth control says the marital embrace is the real reason for marriage, not the person. It says this is something, the marital embrace is something I get, not something I give and receive. It's the opposite of love. It uses them. Divorce. What if marriage is unhappy? Can't I separate? When I have the right to be happy in marriage? This attitude is against the nature of marriage itself. To give oneself in marriage thinking I can get divorced if it doesn't work out is to fail to understand the nature of marriage itself. Marriage is a gift of oneself. Everything one has, everything you are. To put a condition on that gift is to hold back the gift itself. That's the danger and the beauty of the marriage vows. It makes it solid and permanent. It's forever. This is especially true in the sacramental marriage, where God himself is joined a man to his wife and a wife to her husband. Divorce attacks the gift in its permanence, its entirety, its exclusivity. It harms the children in a very deep way. homosexuality. I think it would be good to have a whole talk on this in and of itself, simply because this has become a very big deal and a very important deal. I'm just going to cover it. People have begun to think that this is the most important part of who they are. And so you begin by thinking from the beginning as well, they're gay, is to forget that first of all, they're a child of God and meant for heaven. There's a big difference between those who have a temptation to this and those who are acting on the temptation. There's a difference between those who have a temptation to abuse drugs, temptation to steal, temptation to be angry. The problem with this, we're not saying that what people hear when they say, when the church says homosexuality is forbidden, the people who are homosexual don't have a right to be loved or to love. It's not an attack on the person. It's upholding what marriage is. What it's saying is marriage is meant to be a gift of body to body, of self to self, only done by a man to a woman. Because it's not life-giving otherwise. It's not truly unitive otherwise. It does not join them together. Isn't this too much of a concern about biology? Well, then the Eucharist is too much of a concern with biology. The death on the cross is too much of a concern with biology. If we're made body and soul, then the body matters. What we do with our bodies matter. And so those who have a disordered attraction, disordered desire, have the same responsibility as anybody else, which is to remain chaste and pure. Masturbation. This is the deliberate manipulation of the genital organs, the purpose of giving oneself physical pleasure. This destroys the two meanings of the marital embrace, both life and love. It's simply selfishness. It makes the sexual act simply about the pleasure the body can provide. And if someone gets into the habit of this sin, they're going to have a real problem giving themselves their spouse. Hard time accepting their spouse completely. Pornography separates the body from the person. So the person is someone to be used. It's the buying and selling of people. It hurts everyone involved in it. It makes the sexual act simply not about the person, but simply about a picture. Let me end real quick. I'm afraid I've taken up too much of your time already. Let me just end real quick with one final note. There's a big difference in those struggling with sin and those who choose it. If we struggle with a sin, we get back up immediately and try to serve God even if we were weak and fall. If we struggle and try to choose God's will, then we're seeking to follow God completely. God gives us the warning about evil not to scare us, but to show us how to be happy, to show us how to live. He warns us against sin, he condemns it, he punishes it. This is to make us flee to him to be healed. He wants to embrace us as his children and to lead us to love, to come back to him. And so God gives us several means to help us avoid these kind of sin. We have to avoid what leads to these kind of sin. If you know we're tempted in certain ways, we avoid those things. Those who play with matches get burned. We can train our bodies in fasting and abstinence. One of the reasons for Lent. Most important is prayer. And never abandon those who turn to him. Never abandon those who try to come to him. God loves you. God cares about you. And if he warns you about these things, because he loves you and cares about you. And he wants you to come to him completely, entirely. He's waiting for you. And he wishes you to be with him forever in heaven. And he wants not just your life there to be holy, but your life even here to be happy completely. Let's close with a quick prayer. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. That was lots to go over. Tom, do I have time for questions, or we have to?
If we're gonna do this, we should probably get on it.
What time is it?
7:50.
7:50? We're not gonna do the whole thing, so I'd rather people have a chance to do questions.
I can stay afterwards too, if anyone wants to ask me questions.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so going back to what Father was saying,
Yeah.
the way I interpret it was like, you know, going to Vegas and getting eloped versus getting married in the church. Is that what you mean? Because, you know, the natural marriage
Yeah.
versus the sacramental marriage. Okay,
Right.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Like Protestant
But
marriage.
I think what
like,
Father was talking about too, I was going to get
yeah,
the first
and
time
that's interesting.
question.
Adam and Eve. Yeah.
It was Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And that I understand, but yeah, but what I'm talking about is the difference between two atheists who get married in the community chapel down by the beach, and two Catholics who get married in the church.
Okay.
Right, when people get married, what they think in their mind they're getting into. And
Right.
what God created originally in the Garden of Paradise, like Eden, it's different, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But even the marriage between atheists is meant to be have all the good gifts, all the things I talked about.
Right, yeah.
So that's nothing to wave at this point.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's kind of cool. for
There
them.
is one marriage created by God, just
Right.
one.
Any other question? Paul,
Are you familiar with the disorder androgen insensitivity syndrome?
I am not.
Okay, so what it is it means that your body produces certain hormones. You've all heard testosterone is the male hormone, estrogen is the female hormone. So any hormone that produces masculine effects is called an androgen.
Mhm.
So androgen insensitivity syndrome means that the receptor which responds to androgens like testosterone doesn't work in a person. So a person can be conceived genetically male, so they have an XY chromosome, they don't have
Hermaphrodite.
XX. No, no, no.
Okay.
The word hermaphrodite is very confusing, so it's
Okay.
generally not used in human biology.
Okay.
So this person is born phenotypically female. They have external female genitalia, they have a vaginal open, they have a short vagina. I think that in some cases they have a very small but it does not grow uterus. What they do not have is they do not have fallopian tubes, they do not have ovaries. So they actually have testes. You take out the tissue, you test its testes. They produce non-viable sperm, they have no sperm delivery method. This person develops till puberty, phenotypically appearing as a girl. In puberty, they develop some secondary sex characteristics. They'll develop breasts that don't form properly, but they'll look like a woman. They won't, their period won't start, and that's generally when they go to the doctor to find out what's wrong with them. So my question is to you, this person with this disorder,
Yep.
because how exactly should they approach sexual ethics? They are genetically male, they have testes, but they are infertile. That is the way they are.
Well, I think the question is, are they able to engage in the full, complete expression of the act? If they're not able to engage in the physical union in that way, you can't be married. You can have friendships, you can have love, you can't get married because you can't engage in that, you can't express it that way. If the action can be completed, then yes, you can get married. I think it's a similar question to looking at, people, because of original sin, because of personal sin, things happen, and things happen the way they're supposed to always happen. And so people are meant to have two legs. Not everyone has two legs. And that doesn't mean they're not human beings, it doesn't mean they're not good, it just means that they have things that have to be addressed and special difficulties in their life. And so you also remember that they're not less human, they're not less good, they're not less meant for God, but they have a certain difficulty because of original sin, which allowed this disorder to happen, and perhaps personal sin if there was something that was taken by the mother or the father which enabled it to develop. Questions?
Going back to divorce,
Yeah.
I remember you talking about, you quoted a saying like a pope or somebody, and they were saying that as long as the marriage is like consummated, there is no grounds for divorce.
Well, it's an impossibility, yeah. The sacramental marriage.
There's no possibility.
Yeah, so,
My
yeah.
question is so what happens if you don't consummate? Can you get a divorce like through the church, or how would that work? Because I know some people
Yeah.
that have, I mean, I don't really know why.
well, the couple that I would say, there's a difference between separation and a divorce. The difference between an annulment and a divorce. Let's go through these things. So let's go through divorce. annulment, and separation. Divorce breaks a bond, separates it. The marriage bond in some way. And that's what most people think about. Annulment, so most people get divorced, they say, we're married, we talking our language. My ex-husband, my ex-wife. Had this bond of marriage, had these vows, but the vows are broken, we don't have to live them. And annulment says that due to a defect in the vow itself, no marriage occurred. When the church says that it gives annulment, it's not saying at this point there's no marriage anymore. It says there never was a marriage. Either you didn't intend to give yourself entirely, you didn't understand what marriage was, you were incapable in some way. If you were insane, you were forced at gunpoint, there was no marriage. Separation says there is a marriage. But it can't be lived because of human sin. So a guy who's a really angry drunk who's going to kill his wife, the wife can leave him. She's still married, she can't get married to somebody else. She doesn't have to live on the same roof if it's a danger to her. But there's still a marriage, so she has to be faithful to him. That's what it vows. So that's a separation. Marriage is meant to have both a spiritual consummation, the wedding vows, and physical consummation. And so, if all they have is that spiritual consummation without the physical consummation of sexuality, the gift hasn't been given in its entirety. If it hasn't been given in its entirety, yes, the church can break it. And it would be a very rare case that would happen, but it can be done. But once it's been given in its entirety, then it's permanent forever. But yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
So if separation has occurred, are you still allowed to get a legal divorce?
Yeah, you are allowed to, as long as you understand it's not a divorce in the eyes of God. It's a divorce for the convenience, for the sake of surviving monetarily, perhaps protection for the children. But in God's eyes, in reality, you're married. But because of this act of violence, because of whatever's going on, you can't live that marriage.
But separation is not permanent. It's just a temporary.
Right. Ideally, it would be. It could be permanent depending on how long the case lasts. But hopefully, ideally, get back together. The idea is always, thank you, Father, is always to get back together and be reunited again if possible. Always. You want to have the marriage vow, its ideal is perfection.
And if you are divorced and remarried,
well, first of all, you're not.
well,
You can't be divorced and remarried. So someone who is married in the church gets divorced legally and tries to get married again. The second marriage isn't a marriage at all.
There is no divorce in the church.
Yeah, because you already have you can't give yourself. If I give this to Father, and it's his entirely, I can't then take it from Father and give it to somebody else. I can do it physically, but not really. It might look like I've done it. I might think I've done it, but if he owns it, then I can't take it back.
yeah, okay, so you were married to somebody and you're living with somebody else.
Yeah, it's really an act of adultery and an act of sexual, yeah, it's an attempted marriage.
So, what are you, I don't know, let's say somebody converts and finds themselves in that situation, are you only required not to have sex, or is there sort of an emotional chastity that you're expected of, or are you required to?
So if
You live
someone
a Joseph-like
someone
marriage.
converts, that means that he didn't sin even. He didn't know the truth about marriage. He thought it's okay.
Well, but there are, yeah, so I know what you're saying. Yes, the short answer would be, every case is different and complicated. There's no easy marriage case, unfortunately. People get themselves in all kinds of messes. And then they expect God to automatically work things out. Sometimes things you can't work out. Ideally, I mean, in some cases you can go to your first marriage and say, it's an annulment. We didn't know what marriage was. That marriage, we can look at it and say there wasn't no marriage in the first place. Then we can get married in the church. In cases you can't. It gets really complicated there because sometimes you have children from the second marriage. and now you have a responsibility and duty to those children. And so, yeah, you might be required to live as chastely and as much like brother and sister as possible. But you might still have to live in the same house, take care of the children.
So does that just require a sexual chastity, or is there some other sort of?
Well, sexual chastity one can measure. The emotional chastity is not necessarily under one's control in the same way.
Yeah. So, but are you still sort of bound in a way?
You're bound to be as chaste as possible. Doesn't mean you can't have friendships. Doesn't mean you can't love the other person, care for them deeply. Anything that would lead to the sexual act, anything that would lead to trying to give oneself in this way is wrong. But there's not like it's like the same question, how close can I get to sitting with my girlfriend before it's a sin? Well, there's not a demarcation this far no further. I mean, there is, but it's hard to see sometimes. It's not like I can give a list of details. If one falls into it, if one is trying to give oneself in this way before marriage, it's wrong.
That's the last question. It's 8:00.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening.